sort of first thank the Low family for us being able to come to their farm and use it for a gathering like this. I think it's quite a convenient positioning for everybody to come from the different areas. Some of you guys are coming quite far from Longavan, Series, all over the place. And Richard and Joseph, they're the beekeepers on the farm. We meet every year, so thank you for having us on the farm. And I hope that we can all share our experiences. We're going to be in here for a little bit. If you want to get comfortable, please do. I think we're going to do what we're going to do is do a dry run of doing splitting. Unfortunately, Chris Nickton, who was going to do his demonstration, couldn't make it. He's got a water problem on his farm, and with the big Nampu show going on in Brazil, so he was booked. Long story short, he couldn't make it to demonstrate. But we've got James and Riet. We've got Tiernis, who's also going to share his experiences with his problems up in the north and how he recovered from that. So we're going to talk about that, but I wanted to start first with just beehives on canola. Canola's saved the bee industry, I think, in the Western Cape, especially the pollination industry. Having these flowers at this time of the year when there's not much else flowering is just amazing as a management tool for us with our bees. Especially with the days being a bit shorter with cold weather and the rain, the bees have a shorter amount of hours in the day to get food to stimulate them to build up. So the canola is really, really great, and it's a great tool, management tool for us. And it stimulates the bees amazingly the bees to stimulate the queen to lay eggs. So what we do, I'm just going to give you a rundown of what we do on the canola. Is we use it as we've got 2,000 hives, and to drive to sites with 10 hives here and 12 hives there, and it takes a long time. And that one's ready, and you've got 2 hives ready for pollination, and then you're going to pick them up and you take them. It doesn't work for a big operation like ours doing pollination. So we use it as a tool to bring all our hives into one place, and then we can spend the whole day on one site. It was 200 hives, 250 hives, 100 hives depending on the site. And we can just stay in one place instead of driving in your bucky and spending all that time sitting and driving and driving and driving. So that's great, and we can replace our floors and we can do all of our management. So we bring all our bees onto the canola, and the big threat with having those massive camps is spreading diseases. Our big concern obviously is, I hope all of us know, is AFB. And we all need to be very familiar with AFB symptoms and inspection. So our first thing when we get to canola is we don't want to infect our hives from one hive dying from AFB. So our first thing is we check for AFB to all our hives. And we're not doing an AFB inspection today because I don't have any here. I've got a very low amount of AFB this year, which is very nice. But it's the first thing that we should all do, I believe, when you put bees on any site, is you check them all for AFB, and then you know where you're working from, that you're clear. But at the same time, when we're doing AFB inspections, it's also an opportunity to check your equipment for leaky hives. We try to comply. I'm going to be speaking from a pollinator's point of view. We're trying to get our hives up to pollination standard. And one of the standards for pollination is when you drive into a farm, you don't want leaky hives that the bees are coming out and stinging the farm workers, or you have to stop with diesel and there's chaos. The only time you want leaky hives is when you're pulled over at a weighbridge. So with having all your hives in one place, it's a great time to go through your equipment and replace your broken boxes, your floors and your lids, and make sure that it's all bee tight. What are we trying to achieve on the canola? My first goal is to have beehives, bee colonies that are up to standard for pollination. Pollination is not just about taking any old hive that you've just picked up off your sites and you dump them onto a fruit producer's farm and he pays you for them. Pollination hives is about a standard, and that's the new thing I've been pushing this year, trying to improve our standards that we are giving the fruit producers so that they respect us. We're not just taking any old shit and dumping it, and there's actually not bees in it, or there's such a small amount of bees that they're not doing anything. There's a standard, and there's a reason there's a standard. It's firstly so the producer gets what he's paid for, but also the standard's there to protect us, because if we put in beehives that are up to scratch, up to the standards that we recommend, and it's not just a Samtak that recommended a standard. That standard was worked out with Mike and with a few commercial guys. We've sat down, we've looked at what is achievable for us as beekeepers. So if you put in a strong hive, it comes out strong. If you put in a little handful of bees, they come out empty, dead, or so weak that you're going to have to work so hard to get them to stay alive till next year. So the standard as per the WCBA standard is firstly a standard beehive, being a Langstroth type beehive, which most of us are working with. We all know what a standard beehive should look like. Well, standard beehive is the Langstroth box with 10 frames of bees, with combs that are not interlinked from catch boxes where they go across eight frames. Because if you've got combs like that, how on earth did you manage your colony before it went into pollination? So your combs are all removable, your frames are all movable, removable, so that you can work your beehive. So now we're on the pollination standards. Before we go to standards, part of the management in the canola after doing AFB inspections is also doing frame replacement, because we've all got shit like this. Drone comb. You don't want that in our hive, especially in the middle of the nest. The queen generally lives on your middle 6 frames, so you want those to be your best. So somebody asked me earlier, and I've done this before, but I'm just going to do it for the guys who knew in the bees, and even some of the older guys. It's recommended that every year we replace 2 old frames with foundation. And which frames where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it? It's always the trick. Do you go through your whole hive and look for the bad frames and take them out and put new frames in? But with the operation my size, I haven't got time to now go and look through each box hunting for the bad combs, and then it's got brood on and playing games with it. So I've got a set system that any of us can do. We go to the hive, I work from left to right, we just take out the last frame. The crap frame, drone brood, very poor condition. We take that out. We might take out number 9 and number 10. But at least one. We can always start with one. We just shift all the frames across. And we pop in a new foundation. Number 2 over here. Full sheets of foundation, guys. If you want to get rid of this drone brood, don't put in strips, because if you put in just a strip, it's cheap, and some guys want to work that way. I'm not saying, actually I shouldn't say don't. I recommend that you put in full sheets, because then you end up with comb that's uniform, all cells the same size, and once that queen gets laid, she lays up 90% of this frame with just slabs of brood. And that's 6,000 bees in here, in one frame. So you've got 5-6 frames of brood that emerges. You do the math. But on a frame like this, maybe she can lay 50% of it. You're only getting 3,000 bees on a frame. So you really, really want to keep your center of your nest with beautiful combs like that. And that comes from putting in full sheets, as Ian said. Full sheets of foundation. We put them in on the side of the brood nest. We don't whack them in the middle of the brood nest. So if the brood nest is sitting here, we put it to the side. The bees will draw it out beautifully on the canola. And then maybe 2 weeks later, you can take another frame out and shift it up again. Or you can do 2 at the same time, depending on how much time you've got. Second frame. Boom. You're going to go to your brood nest twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. So this is your opportunity to get your brood nest right. This is the most important part of your hive, your colony, is that this nest where the queen lives in the best possible condition for her to lay maximum amount of eggs, so that you've got a maximum amount of bees. Beekeeping is a numbers game, guys. You want to have as many bees in the box as possible. Then you can do whatever you want to with them. So the more bees you've got, the more honey you can produce, or the more you can split, or the better the pollination unit. So the way you get more bees is beautiful conditioned combs. Going back to pollination standards. So we've got a 10 frame Langstroth hive with removable frames. The combs are, the frames have got wires to support your combs, so when we're transporting the hives, the combs don't break, and they are supported. And then by law we have to have our CA number on, or your DARAD number on your hive, so that has to be on your hive. You want to have equipment that's leak proof. And now you've got your hive, you want to have a laying queen, so you need to have brood in all stages, eggs, larvae and cap brood. Disease free. You guys have probably all seen the standards. If you haven't, go have a look at the WCBA website for the standards, but it's got all the requirements as far as what is allowed as far as chalk brood and AFB and EFB and all the other diseases. And then the actual standard of the bees is probably the most important part. We're talking about all the cosmetic outer stuff, but the standard of the bees, what's in the box, is really what it's about. And it used to be 3 frames of brood and 6 frames of bees in a box. For me, that's not really a very strong colony, guys. And on cold days, they're going to be very inactive, if at all active. So the standard, we picked it up to a minimum of 4 frames covered 75% of the comb area with brood. That is the standard for the amount of brood in a hive. And then at least 8 frames of bees 8 frames covered in bees. So it used to be 6 frames covered in bees and 3 frames of brood. That's a very, very poor standard. So you've got a hive now with 4 frames of brood. I actually put 5 frames of brood in because my bees make honey and pollination. They come out looking phenomenal. But a minimum of 4. If you've got 4 frames, 75% covered in brood, what's 75% of 6,000? 4,500 times 4. It's nearly 20,000 bees that are going to come out of those combs. So if we just put this box into pollination just like this, because there's only 8 frames covered in bees, and you put it on your bucket here and get there fine. 2 weeks later, that brood's emerged, and suddenly you've got an extra 20,000 bees that are all squashed into this box. And then you're going to close the entrance and put it on your bucket and load another 30 hives, and that takes you an hour. And then you're going to drive for an hour and a half from Feyerboom to Ceres or whatever. And by that stage, this poor hive is so heat stressed because there's no space. So we need to give space. So a super's not for honey production and pollination. It's to create space for the girls when we're transporting them, so that we can reduce heat stress. Yeah. Space so the bees can move out of the brood nest so that they can ventilate, try to ventilate through that piece of orange bag that you've stuffed so tightly in there that they're actually not ventilating. It's a very important consideration, heat stress on bees. So that's why we put a super on. I've got fancy lids. They've got little vents in them and the bees can go in and cluster in. But you don't need to be fancy. There's many ways to create ventilation. Yiku over here cuts slits in the side of his box and he just runs his hive tool in it and takes the propolis out, and that creates great ventilation also. But we need to give the bees space for ventilation. Important to have that standard, guys. That standard for pollination will improve our image with the fruit farmers. I think that we have such an important part to play in agriculture now as the global population is just expanding and there's this demand for beautiful food. to be exported. And without the bees, they're not going to get that quality. So there's an opportunity for us to make money, for us to have a great, tight relationship with the fruit farmers. And that's through giving a professional service and not taking a chance with the standards of your beehives. I feel like I've left out a whole lot, and I don't want to ramble on about pollination standards, apart from please become familiar with it, and let's try and all comply with the standards. As I said, for the producer, they're going to get what they paid for, and they're going to get good pollination, but you are going to, at the end of the day, see the rewards of putting in good quality hives into pollination, because they come out looking amazing. The day was about splitting, and that's why we're all here, I think, wanting to know how to split successfully. There's some people that say you can't split successfully with a Capensis bee, and quite a lot of us, quite a few people here that has great success with splitting bees. I can see a few faces of people, and I do more than 1,000 splits a year. I expand my operation, I replaced my empty hives. I don't catch bees anymore, I only split bees. With great success. Somewhere between 85 and 95, sometimes 100% success, it works. Doing it on the canola, where you've got 200 hives on the site, let's say a third of them you split. You can go to a site and split 30 hives on one site, and a couple of weeks later, when the other ones are built up, do the other 35 or whatever, as opposed to putting out catch boxes. I feel that that's quite an efficient way of filling your equipment. I do the sum for the catch boxes, and you probably heard me going on about it before, but I don't think it's particularly economical. You drive all the way out to all the canola fields and you drop off one, and then you come back a month later and check them, and you see, okay, I got a 50% hit, and then you load them up and you take them to a site, and then you have to go back to the site and rehive them and check them, and and then you've got to come back and check the other catch boxes, and then at the end of the season, catch boxes that didn't catch, you also have to pick them up. And if you look at how many trips you go out to put catch boxes out, and how much effort goes into preparing them and then rehiving them and getting them into a state that you can do something with them, it's a lot of effort and a lot of money. And then you're also catching bees that have a propensity to swarm, because you're catching swarms. So now you're going to have extra 100 hives this year, but as soon as they build up, in that time in spring when you want them strong, they say, it's swarm. Because that's their tendency. Whereas when you're splitting, we're splitting our strong hives, the hives that are built up strong in spring. And they haven't swarmed. And those are the ones you're splitting. And those genetics, those characteristics in the bees, you're encouraging that and you're taking it forward. You're not splitting your weak hives, obviously. And those are the ones you don't really want in your operation. So I strongly believe that splitting bees is a first world way of managing your bees. It's like being a sheep farmer, where you try and work with your stock and you try and improve it all the time. So I encourage you guys to not look at catching the wild swarms and relying on that. We don't know how sustainable that is going into the future about catching bees. The bee industry has been based on it. But it's far too easy just to let your bees die from AFB and catch more bees, and you don't actually learn. When you start to do this work, you learn so much, and you become a good beekeeper when you start to look in your brood chamber and do all the work I'm talking about. Looking for AFB, learning how to split, looking at what the queen's doing, looking at the condition of your combs. As I said, I think splitting's the way to go. So Tiernis has very kindly joined us this morning, and I'm going to let him take over. I know I've forgotten a whole lot of stuff. Tiernis comes from up in Douglas side, and had a very successful beekeeping operation up there. And then some very clever Western Cape beekeepers took our Capensis bees up to the north and caused a huge problem and a collapse of the beekeeping industry in the north. And Tunis went through a very challenging time of a very successful business being reduced to next to nothing. And I asked him if he could share his story, because it ties in with the splitting a little bit of how he managed to recover from that big challenge that he had. So Tunis, would you like to come up and share your story? For the Afrikaans speakers, he's going to speak Afrikaans, so it's not just going to be an English day. I'm sorry, my Afrikaans is not very good.
Lekker het ons Brendan nie, dus hy enige iemand wat nie verstaan is, vir Brendan is gauw tot julle verduidelik. Hierdie is nie ons broeikaste daar, woordelik nie, is maar net ene wat uitgedien is, hy is daarom seker 30 jaar diens gedoen of so, maar ek het dit maar net gebring vir die demonstrasie. Goed, ek het 1986 het ek voltyds begin bygevoer. In 74 begin met bye. Was ek op skool, op universiteit, AMI 86 klaar, toe ek voltyds begin bygewoon. En getalle het redelik vinnig gegroei. Net split, nie my splits nie, maar ek sal nou julle vertel waar vandaan dit kom. En dan in 1990 het ons gepenkingsprobleem gekry. 1990-91 seisoen, ons het al ons bye verloor en ons moes planne maak om weer die spul in die gang te kry. So wat gebeur het is, toe ek in die bye gekom was, miskien ken julle hom, by die van het kloppie, Frank Steinhover, wie van julle so onthou nie. En hoe Frank lewe nog, hy is 93, hy bly in Pretoria en hy gaan nog aan. Hy het nog altyd 'n paar byekorwe, hy woon nog 'n bietjie bye. Maar hy het bye gesplit, reeds in die 70er jare. En op daai stadium het dit baie kritiek uitgelok omdat hy dit gedoen het. Wat ons gedoen het, want ek wil my getalle meer maak en ek kon by hom bye koop, maar om bye te koop by hom moes ek hom van die help split op die albei. Die mense wat miskien daai dele ken, daar springbokvlakte dele, die Subiane albeine wat daar groei. Die goedjies, daar's baie van hulle. Presies dieselfde effek as Canola, baie hoog in protein, die bye ontplof. En dan het ons Frank daai sommetjie baie mooi gemaak. Hy het geweet as hy bye inry op so datum, dan op so datum het hulle koninginsel. So hy kon nou nie sê waar presies trek die koninginne of hulle nou op dag, sê maar op dag 8 of op dag 9 of 10 waar die koninginne trek nie, maar hy het geweet wanneer daar koninginsel in die korwe is. So dan het ons gegaan, spanne het gegaan en ons het goed gesplit. Sy methode van split daai tyd was, mens sien nog die prentjies, plekke, hy het noekies gehad. So op die broeikas het 2 noekies gepas, en dan het hy dekseltjies gehad wat op die noekies pas. So as jy die kas in 3 gesplit het, dan was dit nou ongelyk, maar dan het hulle die 2 klein dekseltjies gehad. En dan het ons in die aande gekom, en jy moet die voete afry. Nou as jy gelukkig is, dan het jy so tussen 50 en 70 swerms op 'n dag neergewerk, en jy kan dit dubbel in getal gee. So dit beteken, die gemiddelde split is 2, partykeer 3, partykeer 1 split, maar alles is gedoen met koninginselle wat in die korwesel was. So jy die rame maar net gebruik, as daar nie genoeg rame met koninginselle was nie, jy 'n selletjie uitgesny, sommer met die korfbuitel en net oorgedra om te sorg dat alles koninginsel is. So hy was baie suksesvol, hy het 'n besigheid gehad van so 6000 korwe. En nou Frank is seker die mees suksesvolle byeboer wat Suid-Afrika tot nog toe opgelewer het. Nou ja, toe gebeur die onvoorsiene en dit is dat ons gependes bye inkry. Ons bye het begin vrek. Eers het hulle vir my dit gehoor daar Pretoria omgewing bye vrek. My bye was eintlik nog mooi, as jy die goed sondeblomme so vervat, ons gedink ons gaan 'n oes kry. Toe ons daar kom toe langs vragte en vragte dooie kaste op. En daar is toe besluit dat alle bye doodgemaak moet word. Alle kommersiële bye moet doodgemaak word en ons moet oorbegin. Nou, dit het, ons het subsidies gekry, julle my vrou, hoeveel kan ek nie onthou nie, per kort. Alles is doodgemaak, in my geval het hulle een standplek oorgehou wat 10 korwe gehad. En die staat het my gesê, daai enetjie lyk reg, en daai 10 nou. En op daai stadium het ek so by die 5000 korwe gehad, alles is dood, weg. So, jy moet eers begin, die staat het gesê, hulle gee vir ons geld, maar hulle gee nie vir jou geld, hulle sê, help jou, jy kry geld nie. Jy moet die bye terugbou, en dan word jy per kort, wat hulle inspekteer, kry jy die subsidie. Wat natuurlik ook van 'n bye boerdery baie loopels los, en die goed word rondgeskrywe, en ek dink daar was miskien, agterna is daar gesê, daar was baie, miskien maar skelmstreke gewees met dit. Wat ek wel kan sê is, ten spyte van dit, was sonneblom op daai stadium die groot ding wat bestuif moes word. Die getalle wat daar moes ingaan was baie groot, en ten spyte van die bye wat getrek het, was daar metodes en mense wat het reg gekry om die bestuivings nie te deurstrek. Daar was nooit 'n tekort aan nie bye nie. My eerste situasie, ek het 10 korwe oorgehad, ek het afgery, ek het by Appington, het ek by iemand nog 60 korwe gekoop gekry. So ek het, hulle was soos wat bye lyk wat gevang is, die koeke was deur mekaar, was gemaak om dit goed reg te maak. Besef, my planne is te min, ek gaan nie die goed reg kry met die inligting wat ek het van dit wat ons by Frank geleer het nie. Die alwyne is net 'n klein rukkie, en ek moet 'n plan maak, so ek het na Amerika toe gegaan, en van kyk waar die mense op groot skaal koninginne maak. Die ou wat my regtig geïnspireer het, was ou oom Homer Park, hy is ook al lank al oorlede, maar as jy in Californië is, as jy daar opgaan, of hier onder Florida, Texas, daar is 'n klompie mense wat pakkies bye maak en koninginne maak, en hulle boer maklik met 10-12.000 swerms, en hulle haal nie 'n druppel heuning uit nie. Alles gaan terug bye. So hulle maak pakkies by hulle, maak koninginne, en hulle verkoop miskien 50.000 gepaarde koninginne, 100.000 selle meer, en miskien 50 of 60.000 pakkies bye in 'n jaar. Dit is hulle besigheid. Hulle is net ingerig om dit te doen. So, Hongerpark het, dit is maar die ou wat my geïnspireer het, regtig geïnspireer het. En ek onthou as ek vir my ouma gevra wat ek gedoen het, ons het maar gegaan, daar was 'n paar bye, Suid-Afrikaanse bye boere wat saam gegaan het, en dan gaan werk jy 2-3 dae by 'n ou, en dan beweeg jy aan, dan werk jy maar weer 2-3 dae by 'n volgende ou, en dis hoe ek nou maar bye geleer het, die Amerikaners se maniere leer ken. Ek het vir my ouma gesê, ek het 60 kaste by die huis. Ek het 4.700 nodig volgende jaar. Ek moet in 2 jaar moet ek my besigheid terugbou. En hy het nie altyd mooi gehoor het, dat hy sê, so hier is die meest gepraat, maar ek kon nou hom verstaan het, hy het my sê, as jy goed is, dan gaan jy dit reg kry. Dan kan jy dit reg kry. Maar jy sal jou goed baie mooi moet uitsorteer. Die Amerikaanse manier van koninginne maak, ek dink dit is redelik, ek weet nie, ander dele Europa, daar het ek het nou nie raak genoeg nie, maar hulle werk met royalty starters finishers, en met royalty starters finishers kan jy die goede aanpas as jy wil, jy kan net eers weer op die bye, as jou koninginnetjie reg bly, kan jy baie bye maak. So, dit is die een ding waarvoor ons versigtig moet wees. Die siklusse van bye is baie kort, en as jy, as die een bye, een koningin 2 keer in die Weskaap opsit, is nie genoeg wees vir almal wat wil splits maak. Goed, ek het op 'n klein skaal dit net gedoen. Ons het elke dag ten minste 100 koninginne gehad vir 365 dae in die jaar. So ons het nooit ophou koninginne maak. Die goed wat ons gebruik het om koninginne te maak, het ons aanhou voer, en ons het gesorg dat daar elke dag koninginne beskikbaar is, ten minste 100. Later het 10 jaar nodig gehad, ek het die rooi serie gepad, en ek onthou, Dominique Marchand was eendag daar by my, en gevra het my, wat maak ek met die goed, en sê ek weet nie, ek sê my wil lees, so ek het maar gepad daar, wat het ook al kon werk, as ek weet het. Maar, dit is die basis van, as jy regtig massas by jou moet maak, dan moet jy saam met dit koninginne maak. Daai koninginnetjies, die stelsel van die Amerikaners is so, jy in ons geval het 'n bietjie vroeër uitgebroei. So werde maak hulle splits die oggend en die koninginne broei die middag uit. Jy weet presies hoe laat jy die koninginnetjies gaan uitbroei. In ons geval het die koninginne bietjie vroeër uitgebroei. Ek het gedink as omdat Douglas warmer is. Later moes ek uitvind, maar dis eintlik omdat ons koninginne broei so halwe dag vinniger uit as die bye in die Europese bye, die Italianers, die Caucasians en al die ander. Dit vat so 'n half dag langer om uit te broei. So my koninginne het uitgebroei so tussen 10:00 en 12:00 in die oggend. So ons moet die vorige dag 'n splits maak. Ons moet goed in die oggend 8:00 gaan uithaal. Teen 10:00 moet jy hulle insit, en as jy teen 10:00 nog nie insit, dit baie keer gebeur as jy koningin insit, soos jy haar insit, klim sy sommer uit. Dis hy sommer klaar reg. En dit is die geheim, jy moet koninginne kry, wat as jy wil massa bye maak, wat jy weet, dit gebeur nou. Daai metode is eintlik 'n baie eenvoudige metode, en moet ek sê, in Suid-Afrika kan jy dit altyd doen. Die enigste probleem is, as jy 'n melker het, jy moet nie oggend 2 uur spandeer daar, en jy moet nie middag 1 uur spandeer daar, om die ding in die loop te hou. Wat mooi is 'n baie selfcontroleerstelsel, so jy kan, ek kon mense insit wat dit doen, ek kon enige dag instap, en dan kyk ek, sê, julle werk op hierdie nommerkaste, dan maak ek daai nommers oop, en dan kyk of hulle presies op die nommer, op die regte plek is. Maar dit daar te laat. Terug my split. Skies ek wil nog een ding sê. Ek het daai jaar genoeg koninginne gemaak. Op daai stadium was daar in Suid-Afrika so 26 voltydse byeboere. In die Wes en in die noorde. En tussen hulle het hulle so 'n omgewing van 50-60.000 swarms bye gehad. Ek het gemaklik daai jaar meer as 50.000 koninginne gemaak. Die gevaarlike ding van dit is, dat omdat die bye siklusse so kort is, kan jy verskriklik baie vinnig inteling kry. Nou, ek dink nie ons verstaan altyd wat die effekte van inteling is nie. Maar 'n mooi plek wat mense nou gesien het, was met die wildbedryf. En in die wildbedryf kry jy nou enige kleerbok. En enige kleerbok wat jy kry, is net omdat daar drade gespan was. Suid-Afrika vandag nog nie drade gespan het nie, jy waarskynlik nou nog nie 'n goue wildebees of 'n bondspringbok of wat ook al gesien. So die twee goed wat belangrik is 'n mens moet kyk na jou genetika, hoe jy dit doen. En die ander ding is, jy moet kyk na voeding. Selfs met die wildbedryf. Ewe skielik het die mense hierdie vreeslike bokke met die lang horings begin teel. En almal het gesê dis genetika. Dit het bokkerrol met genetika te doen. Dit is net beter kos geweest. Dit het net beter proteïene gekry. Ons almal het die goede met die emmer gooi. En ewe skielik kry jy lang horings. So 'n mens moet baie oppas dat jy nie die twee goed verwar nie. Ek spot altyd daar, jy kry so 'n dik voedingsboek. Moet op universiteit is dit ook die boek gekry, Feeds and Feeding van Morris. Nou, ek dink hy het in die Bybel daar. Ek weet nie hoeveel mense daai boek in hulle lewe deurgelees het. Ek het daai boek deurgelees. Maar daar in daai boek was net een sinnetjie wat ek onderstreep het. Dit was so kort sinnetjie. En al wat daar gestaan het, is a half the success of breeding is feeding. En dit is op alles van toepassing. Kos speel so 'n groot rol in wat jy doen. As jy koninginnetjies maak, moet jy altyd sorg dat daar styfmeel by hulle is, as jy groot kastelle wil hê. Reg langs so stelletjies, raam met styfmeel sit, vir die baie mooi groot selle. Die wetenskap kon nooit bewys dat daar 'n fout met 'n klein selletjie is, klein koninginnetjie is. So 'n kleiner koninginnetjie en 'n groter koninginnetjie gee waarskynlik dieselfde resultaat, maar vir 'n mens, jou, dis mos nou ons mens, hou van daarvan dat dit moet 'n baie mooi groot koningin. Dit waar die probleem van teeling dan inkom, is dat jy kan net teel, ek gaan bietjie van die punt af miskien, maar jy kan net teel wat jy sien, en in die geval van bye wat jy ook voel. As jy diere teel, kan jy enigiets teel wat jy sien. Jy kan hulle groter maak, kleiner maak, groter eiers maak, jy kan hulle langer maak, jy kan hulle 'n kleur maak wat jy wil hê, swart of bruin of wat ook al. As jy bye werk, gebeur presies dieselfde. Ons het 'n manier gehad, ons het net produksie geselekteer, so ons die goed het in Douglas begin, en dan het ons op die korwe, hy het dit met klein soepertjies gewerk, vir elke soeper wat jy afhaal, druk jy 'n duimspyker op die korwe. En dan het jy 'n paar gehad wat sê jy miskien 6 soepers gegee, 60 kg. En hulle is die paar wat jy nou maar begin volg, toe jy bring hulle bymekaar en hulle skuif nou maar verskillende blomme. En so het jy soepers afhaal, sit jy drukspykertjies op. En dan kry ons nou maar die beste produseer. Maar nou by jou sit jy miskien met, kom ons sê rondom 15 kaste wat jy nou uitgesoek het vir die jaar, wat nou goed presteer. Dan gaan jy gaan werk met die 15 kaste, en wat doen jy? Die wat vir jou die minste beklei, is die waarvan jy die meeste hou. Die volgende is die koninginne kyk, is daar een met 'n baie mooi geel koningin, met 'n koperkleurige koningin. Die een ou gaan 'n geel koningin kies en die ander ou gaan 'n koper koningin of 'n swart koningin. En so begin jy 'n byteel wat eintlik, ek kan amper sê, jou by is. En binne 2-3 jaar kon ek duidelik die effek sien van teeling, bewustelik en onbewustelik. Maar dit dan jy voorkeer gee. Dit is mens, dit is net mens wat dit doen. So, wees baie versigtig met teeling. So, bring die hele ding van split. Ek is 100% vir dit. As jy groot getalle moet bou, split is baie maklik. Die bye is baie vergewensgesind met split. Daar is eintlik nie 'n manier wat nie werk nie. Jy moet net sorg dat jy die regte goed in die kas het om dit te laat werk. As jy koningin kan bysit, soveel makliker. Ek het vir julle gesê wat nou Frank hulle gedoen het, ons het die goed daar gesplit in die noekies in. Jy soek maar net 2 rame uit, een met oopbroed en een met geseelde broed. Dit is nie vol rame broed te wees nie, jy moet net oopbroed of geseelde broed hê. En jy sit hulle tweetjies bymekaar saam met kos en jy sorg dat daar genoeg bye is. Vandag nog, my mense, as ons die so split ook, dan split ons nou net in 2, ons split nie in kleiner is dit nie, so jy skep maar net van onder na bo, goed en vanaand kom haal jy dit af. Dit is hoe ons dit doen, ek glo nog steeds, dit is jou beste manier om 'n gebalanseerde swerm te kry. As jy die bye vir die dag los, of vir 'n paar ure los, dat hulle kan uitsorteer, selfbytjies, werkerbye en so aan. Maar later dan raak 'n mens, begin jy nou maar ander maniere kry, want jy wil graag die besigheid spoed gee, jy het spoed nodig. In die begin is dit min, die 60 word miskien 100 ja, 60 word so 150, word nooit 180, sê maar 150, die 150 word sê maar 350, 400, as dit 400 is, dan wil so, kom ons sê daarom so by 1000 uitkom, so jy die somme maak oor broeiperiodes van 6 weke, dan is dit eintlik baie vinnig om groot getalle op te bou. Let wel 6 weke, 3 weke begin broei uitbroei, 6 weke het jy voorherstel, jy naas die herstel. So wat ons gedoen het, en dis hoekom ek sommer net die goed gebring het, ek het toe gegaan en ek het sommer net 'n vloer gemaak met 'n vloer gemaak, wat net 'n sif in is, wat ek net weet, ek versnoor hierdie goed nie. En dan met die kas het maar net in dit pas, lekker stewig met die bye nie lek nie. So wat ons gedoen het, ons het goed dubbelbroeikaste gemaak, geen koninginrooster nie, jy wil hê, ons het net bye meer gemaak, jy weet, jy wil soveel as moontlik bye hê. So as jy 'n dubbelbroeikas vol bye gekry,
I've got another brood chamber. Do you want to demonstrate it?
nee, is ook en al wat jy doen, jy daai deksel oopgemaak het en jy sien die kas is lekker vol, dan gooi jy vir jou 4 of 5 vloertjies om jou, en jy sit kassies op, en jy begin letterlik hierdie ding opdeel. Jy probeer so min as moontlik van die, jy probeer ook nie die koninginnetjie te vat nie, en jy deel die goed op in hierdie 4 of 5 goed om jou.
Sorry, so daai soepertjie is eintlik 'n volkas.
Ja, dit is 'n volkas. Dit is 'n 30 jaar ou broeikas wat jy wil weggooi. Dit is wat jy net kan om pas te raak. Kom jy weer terug te ry.
Ja, maar
Maar in elk geval so, en dan so waar ons altyd net met waar ons gemiddeld met 2 swermpies uit 'n swerm weggeloop het. 'n Swerm met 'n klein supertjie kon ons nou dubbel maak en ek kon met hulle so gemiddeld 3 wegloop. So ek kon net dit 'n bietjie verskil maak. So jy pak die goed in, deel dit op, jy deel vir elkeen 'n klomp bye, jy probeer die koningin hier los. Weksels is op, jy skuif hulle en jy gaan laai hulle klaar by die volgende plek af waar jy weer werk. Ek het nou maar sulke stasies gehad, so jy gaan sit hulle neer, kant en dan begin jy weer die volgende ene werk. En hulle laai jy op, jy skuif hulle en as jy daar kom, los jy hulle so vir 'n uur of 2, daal jy die sif uit, jy sit die vloer in en jy gaan net aan. Dis vandag. Môreoggend, tussen 8 en 10, kom jy nou sit vir al hierdie wat ons gemaak het, sit ons koninginselletjies in. Die moederswerm het ons gehoop en geglo die koningin is daar. So ons het hulle nie koninginnetjies gegee nie, ons los hulle 3 dae. Na 3 dae kom jy, trek rame, trek jy eiertjies sien, weet jy koningin is daar. Jy soek nie 'n koningin, trek eiertjies, los hom. As jy nie eiertjies sien nie, dan sit jy koningin self in die moederswerm op, van dan het jy dan vir die koningin. So dit is die manier wat ons maar gebruik het, saam met dit baie goed. Dit is eintlik die geheim van jy wil enigstens deel, loop ons saam met dit. Goed, ek dink dit is nou nie goed.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, ek kon nie doen wat ek vir hom vaak gevra het. Ek het hom gevra, kan ek in 'n jaar 4700 vorme terugbou? Ek gesê as ek goed is kan ek. Ek kon 2000 in 'n jaar terugbou. Die volgende jaar is baie maklik om die twee na getalle te kry, is nog baie maklik.
Thank you, Tiernis. I think that's quite an inspiring story, and I wanted to use that just to inspire everybody to have a look at splitting. And as Tiernis said, there's many ways to do splits. You just need to put the right ingredients into a box. You need bees, you need brood, you need food. I've got my way of doing it, and you guys are all going to, if you try, going to get your own way. And so we're going to talk about our ways, but James is here first, and so James is going to first explain. We're going to do a dry run here before we go down to the canola where the bees may be a little bit naughty. So James is going to explain his system. And also we must ask questions, guys, just so that you understand what we're trying to do and how we're doing it. And please also talk to Tiernis later if you want to talk to him, ask him about his story. Let's use this as a real learning place. So James has been doing splits for quite a few years now, and with great success. So James, would you like to come up?
Sure.
James, can I help you with the configuration?
Yeah, I've got my setup over there.
Shall I move out the way, James?
Yeah, I think probably I'll give it a shot. Okay. I'm going to show you quickly my method of splitting. What we've got here, actually, it's not quite how I would start. I would normally start without the feeder on, with the lid is super. Last week in June, on a normal year, start feeding. Okay, last week in June, start feeding. Anytime after 21st of June, start feeding and feed a lot. Feed sugar water. I'm using normally about a 40% mixture, and then I'm feeding a pollen patty. Okay. My canola sites generally by second week in July are starting. So I'm lucky. I've got early canola sites. So bees will go onto canola something like that, with a super, a lid, and a deep. As soon as they get onto canola, normally we'll transport them one day and work them the next day. what we'll do is we'll open them up, super comes off, all these frames will be labeled, but all the labels came off on these wax frames. So basically what we'll do is we'll do a full disease check on everything. That is, as Brendan mentioned, that's vitally important. Don't mess with your bees, especially when you start congregating them without first checking for disease. So bees will go onto canola like that. Then the next thing we will do is, if the bees are filling a good 60+% of the box, deep will go. If the bees are more than 60, if they're 80-90% of the box, we will put a super on as well. Okay. Then next thing will be the feeder. On canola, a feeder. Pollen patty will come in between the two. Feeder on top, on canola. Lid.
What frames have you got in the top brood box?
That, at the moment they're probably just full sheets, but ideally you want drawn comb. You don't want to delay. You want that queen to come and start laying throughout. At the time they go onto canola, the queen should already be on the up phase, so that's why you fed her before canola. Okay? Then what we do is we come back after roughly 10 days, 2 weeks. Open up, feeder comes off.
Often do you feed?
We feed once. So we feed when we put them there, we don't feed again, we come back 10 days, 2 weeks later.
How much, James?
As much as we can get on. Generally,
5 liters.
this is on Peter's feeder that I got from him. We generally have an inner lid with 2 buckets on, 2 5-liter buckets or 2 2-liter buckets depending on the strength of the hive. And then we put an empty super over with a lid on top. That's my main feeders. So basically after the 2 weeks, we go and we examine. We see, okay, how much brood, how many frames of brood, what kind of brood they are, all that. We go through everything. Next thing we do, everything, all frames come out. Out of both boxes, all frames come out. Okay. Obviously, when you're taking a frame, you're going to shake that frame first. So basically, what you want to do is you don't want any bees on any frames. Okay. You'll go through all these frames will be.
So all the bees are in that brood box now, the bottom.
Well, the ones that aren't in the air are in the bottom. Okay. And you'll probably have a lot of bees on the ground as well and all that, and you would preferably shake them here, and if you can't get them all in here, you'll shake them in front on the ground. I haven't had a problem with queens getting lost or anything like that, or queens landing on the ground and not finding their way back in, which I suspect happens quite often. Okay, all sealed brood in the bottom. All open brood or mixed brood in the top. Okay, so I've got open brood, mixed brood. Okay, so anything that is got any type of open brood that goes in the top. Pollen frame in the top. Pollen frame, nectar, pollen. You don't want to mix up between the brood. But basically, that's what's going to happen. So you're going to shake them all with all bees only in the bottom box. Or on the ground. Or flying around. There's actually a lot of them will. Next thing you're going to do. Queen excluder on. Obviously, center your frames. Queen excluder on. Leaf on. Feeder back on. pollen patty on, lid on, strap.
Where do you put the patty?
I normally put it just here between the two brood boxes. On top of or just under the queen excluder on this. Okay. What works for me, and there's two options here. The one option is on the same day, a few hours later, to take split it again and take one of the boxes away. The way I work and the speed that I work and all those type of things, and I don't have massive labor available, that doesn't work for me. So the alternative for me now is 10 days later, and there's a reason for that. Some people say they can do it anytime, but generally, capensis, too long without a queen, lane worker. If you move the queens too early, and especially when you are driving on bad roads and all that, day 2, 3, 4, and 5, and also a bit later, the queen can get damaged, apparently, and die. I can't say that that is a fact, but I just work on the 10 days. So, late on the 11th day, the queen will be emerging, if everything goes well. So on day 10, or very early in the morning, definitely before 11, on day 11, you come back to your bees, lid, feeder off, check for queen cells in the top box.
But your queen will be in the bottom.
Yes, but your open brood would have been in the top.
So you just put a queen excluding in between.
Yeah.
So
all
pheromone divider or
No. So all the bees would have been on the bottom. The idea is that all the nurse bees will come through the queen excluder and settle on the open brood. Okay? That is the trigger. Okay? Sitting on the open brood is the trigger. So what happens is the distance from the open brood to the queen, or the absence of the queen in the vicinity of the open brood, is the trigger to create queen cells. Okay? If it's not on a heavy canola flow, and if you're doing it on the fynbos, then what you would do is, instead of doing it that way, you would have put a super in between to create that distance. The super can have frames in or no frames in. You want to create that distance between the open brood and the queen in the bottom box. That is the whole principle of this method of splitting. Okay? It doesn't matter. It can be open, it can even be an old inner lid with holes on. I sometimes put my feeder lids, an extra set of feeder lids there with holes in. You just want to create that gap.
How does the drones get out?
It's not my problem. The drones won't get through that queen excluder. They won't. They're not going to get. So hopefully they will. I mean, the drones will hatch and they will stuck in here, and those that make it to the 10 days will emerge, and those that don't, well, there's often a lot of dead drones on top of your queen excluder. So then, after the 10 days, what we do is, now there's two thoughts here, and there's two things you can do. And other lid. So there's two things you can do here. The recommended is to take away the original box with the queen, the mated queen, your laying queen that's in that original box, is to take that away to another site and to leave your split to catch the field bees and stay on the original site. That is the kind of the general thought. I don't do mine that way, and I have a reason for that. So what I will do is I will take mine, I will take that split, and I'll put that split on a new floor. That will go with the feeder lid, one that I can just do a bottle feeder on. That will get strapped up, and that will get taken away to my other site. Now you have the option here of, instead of doing it that, if there's a lot of queen cells in here, is to actually split this into 2 nukes, which I sometimes do, or sometimes you get others that for some or other reason haven't created queen cells, but there's maybe 3 frames here with queen cells. I'll take one of these frames and I'll put it into one of my other splits. So that also works. That goes away. Depending on the strength, generally it's a good strength on canola. Another deep will go straight back on. The feeder will go on, pollen patty in between, and we will start again. So,
Can I just ask, maybe I'm missing a step here. Your nurse bees have created a queen cell.
yeah,
How's that queen cell been populated with an egg?
because you've had open brood, that you've taken the open brood from here, you've put in the top box, so the eggs are already there.
So the cells will usually be on the face of the cone. Won't be like a swarm cell at the bottom.
No. It will normally be on the face, yeah. So basically, that's my method. I like to do a Tuesday and a Thursday. So we will do our manipulation on the Tuesday. So we will put the queen excluder in, all the open brood at the top, all that type of thing on a Tuesday. The following Thursday we'll come and take away. So that's your 10 days. We'll go back on the Tuesday and we will see if we can start the manipulation again. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Sometimes we will put a nuke on here and only one nuke, and that will get a floor on top, a lid on top. So, you know, instead of taking, there's a lot of open brood, there's only some or whatever, so we can do that. Sometimes we'll get it too deep and a split on top. It all depends on what is there. But because you've inspected properly for disease, don't be scared of taking brood from other hives and creating your splits. That works very well. So just take brood from other hives, take any resources that you need from other hives, and you're just pooling everything. Everything is just modular, and you're taking a module as you need it to fulfill your recipe. And
You know, 4 frames of brood.
if you've got 2 frames, you can make a nuke. I run quite a lot of nukes. I've built a whole lot of nukes as catch boxes, and as you know, nukes don't really catch bees. So I've repurposed them to be proper nukes and to take a split off. On feinboss, this will work to a lesser degree. Feinboss, I found you have to put a gap in between. The stimulation is not enough, as canola does. Your protein, your food, everything isn't coming in as quite as strong. So feinboss, you need a gap between your open brood and your queen excluder, otherwise your success is much less. Okay, that's my main method of splitting on canola.
Okay.
Why do you normally use your split and take your mother box? Why do you
Because my main aim here is to make as many splits as possible. I'm not making one split. I'm going to carry on as long as possible. My main canola sites, I'm lucky, give me almost up to 8 weeks of canola. So it's different varieties planted in the same area, and when one's going off, the other one's on, and on 8 weeks, the best I've done is I've done 3 splits and had the original box. Okay? But generally you can quite easily get 2 splits off in that period quite easily, and those splits, if your canola is early enough, which is vital, if your canola is early enough, those splits with the right feeding and everything else will be at pollination standard.
James, this box that you're taking away with the queen cells or whatever.
Yeah.
I found my bees make a few queen cells, and then when I take it away, they just start swarming. One swarm after the other, and then there's almost no bees left.
I used to make sure that I had 2 queen cells and wipe out the rest. I don't do that anymore, and I haven't noticed any difference.
The first queen normally kills off the other ones.
Yeah.
So she hatches out the first one, the strongest one, kills off.
I tried it with 5 hives, and 4 out of the 5 swarmed. Only one. I didn't check for queen cells,
Yeah.
but it must have been a few queen cells.
It could be, or they could have just been too full, and then they overthink. There is one other simple method, and that I think is probably what Jens was speaking about with the Noble, if I understand it correctly. And that is, if you're a small guy and you haven't really got canola access and you want to make a little bit of a split, what you would do is, at the beginning of the season, you would put in 2 frames of foundation with a feeder. But those 2 frames go against exactly what Brendan's saying here. Those 2 frames you would put in the middle of your brood. So you would put it maybe 1 year and 1 over here. So probably 1, 2, 3, 4. At number 4 and 7 position, somewhere around there. You put it 2 frames of foundation, full sheet foundation, in the middle of your brood, with a feeder on top. Generally, I wouldn't have a super at that stage. You come back. I'm trying to remember the timing now for the commences. I think it is about a week later. I'll have to double check on that. You come back a week later, those 2 come up into 2 nukes. They will have eggs in them already. They'll be drawn and they'll have eggs. They go up into the nukes, couple of other frames in there, new frames in the bottom, preferably drawn comb in your brood box, queen excluder in between. And then it's, yeah, then from there it will be the same thing. 10 days you take it away and you've got 2 nukes, or you'll leave those 2 nukes on the site and take your mother away. That I think is the the original Noble split. But yeah, I did that. Generally, I didn't have that much success on that, not splitting on canola. It just, yeah, it was mixing. I'm not a full-time beekeeper. I have another business, and finding that specific days for that one, it just didn't work out for me. For me, the Tuesdays and the Thursdays work very well for me. So I can plan Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that just works for me.
So the method that you just referenced, would that be more applicable within the context of fynbos?
Fynbos, or even on a gum flow or anything, but that will work out basically anywhere in a good place where there's a bit of rhamnus, there's maybe some echium, that type of thing, and particularly at the beginning of spring. So when you put in your 2 new frames, beginning July, August, somewhere around there, that generally works on those times.
And the remainder of filling those 2 nukes that you were referring to, where you bring the 2 frames into,
you would
that be
pinch
also
a couple of frames from the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If, is there any time that you could leave it more than 10 days? They say that, well, how long does it take for how long can the queen last before she gets
the queen will, I have done it longer than that, but my success has been marginal on that. So I've had times where work requirements have just made it that on that day I can't get to the bees, and I get there 3-4 days later. We do the same thing. Some of them, when we come back, do have baited laying queens, but most of them don't. So it's, and I suspect that in that time they probably created a new queen from a laying worker or something else. But yeah. Are there any other questions?
Originally, when you feed, how many liters more or less do you feed?
As much as I can get on, but it depends on the size of the colony. I mean, it doesn't help you put in massive amounts on a colony that can't take up that feed. And as I said, feeding on canola, I do that. Most people think I'm mad.
Me too. Especially the early canola.
Yeah.
The bees are still, the canola is not producing a lot of nectar in the beginning, we find, so early.
Yeah. And pollen patties on canola. My feeling is on canola, generally there are rainy days. There are some days where it's just cold and rainy and you're going to get almost no foraging. My bees are continuously working through that feed. They're continuously foraging. I don't have a drop in my queen laying, I believe. The queen is all the time laying at close to maximum capacity. And that is the thing to do with multiple splits. If you're doing one split, I don't think it's going to make that much difference. But if you're wanting to do multiple splits over and over again in that short canola period, 1 or 2 days of delay will miss out on your last split. But just won't be feasible.
I'd like to add on to this, the whole splitting thing. It's just a thought in my mind is what we're doing on the canola. There's such a lot of stimulation on our bees that they want to swarm. So the splitting is also a swarm control. So we're working actually quite close to nature by splitting at that time of the year, because the bees are in that natural build-up where they want to swarm. And then we're splitting them before they swarm so we don't lose half the colony. So it's a very nice tool to use to reduce the size of your colony to prevent them from swarming. And you gain a colony with a new queen.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to say that I should have said is, generally, if you're not finding any drone comb at all in the colony you're splitting from, then your rate of success on that split of them actually building the queen cells drops down.
You're a bit early then.
Yeah, you're a bit early, yeah. I still get about a 60% success, but if there is drone comb, then it's 80-90% plus. So
when you start to see drones, you start to realize the swarm season's close. So it's quite a nice little indicator looking for drones in your hives that you're getting close, and you can start to make your preparations.
Yeah, as Brendan mentioned earlier as well, canola is a great tool. It is a tool for us beekeepers, and we can use it in various ways. I don't try not to let anything get capped with canola honey, number one. Okay. Some of my frames, people might think I'm mad, but I'll wash them out. I soak them in water, shake them out, get the canola honey out of my frames. Canola honey that's crystallized in your frames, you put it in for feed for your bees. What do you find? You find that dry canola powder at the entrance of your hive. Bees don't eat that canola off. You're messing up your frames. If you can try and extract that honey and you've got a market for that, that's great. For me, canola is about drawing comb and producing bees, nothing else. And also strengthening up marginal colonies that may be below pollination standard and bringing them up to pollination standard. And if they're on canola too long, Brendan floods his canola sites, I don't. So I believe my bees build up much faster, and I need more control of my bees on canola than probably you do. So my bees, if I'm not at them quick enough, they're going to swarm anyway, even with me doing all of this. So I'm having maximum 50 hives on a canola site. And yeah, I just, for me, it's a big stimulation. You have to be on it. If you miss a cycle, it's very difficult to get back into a cycle, because you've got queens that are hatching in the top box that you haven't taken away in time. It just messes up everything to get them back into the whole thing. It's now starting to cause problems with the queen below the original mated queen, laying queen. It just, yeah.
You have to keep a calendar and stick to your calendar. It's quite a strict calendar.
Yeah.
As James works on his 10 days, stick to it. Have it on your diary. Have an Excel spreadsheet or something with your timing, your days on, so you can track it if you're going to do it correctly.
And that's why for me, Tuesdays, Thursdays, that system just works very well for me. Sometimes I will do the Tuesday, take off on the Thursday, and I will skip a week. But I'll always start again on the Tuesday. So I'll skip a week, and then that will just give bees no queen exclude in between, that's the time that they build up again into both boxes. I'll skip a week. Then you can make much more splits. There's a lot more colonies that you can split from again. But yeah, sometimes you can squeeze it in just to that, 4 days, 5 days in between. If you work from the Thursday to the following Tuesday, sometimes it's doable. So it all depends.
So as I mentioned, we're working with the swarming impulse in a way. And canola is such a stimulating tool that you have to manage this thing. Otherwise the bees are going to swarm. And one of the key factors to bee swarming is congestion. So that's why James is already at 6 frames of bees. He's already putting his second brood chamber on. They need space in canola. You can't leave them for 2 weeks just in a brood chamber when they're 8 frames of bees, because in 2 weeks when the brood emerges, your box is so full of pollen and nectar and everything, there's no space for the queen, and it's the perfect conditions, that congestion, for swarming. So canola, we're talking canola as well as splits. You have to manage the bees on canola. You can't miss. If you miss it, your bees are going to end up in the trees when you come to site, and the little soapboard says there's the swarm hanging in. And I often miss it, especially when you're running a lot of hives. It's a dance. So you need to pay attention. It's not just put your bees in the canola and you've got these wonderful bees. You need to do your management and all these little points that we're talking about today. Putting in new frames, giving the bees work, giving them space, removing brood so that they don't get too big.
And then if you've heard on my cycle, and I'm saying that sometimes the maximum I get is 3 splits plus the original colony. If you look at that cycle, you would think actually in those weeks, with the 6 to 8 weeks canola, you should have more splits. Aerial spraying is the reason why there's no more splits in that. On most of my sites, there's always 1 week where you go there where the bees are weak. There's no dead bees. There's just not that many bees. And the bees are weak. And there's no empty queen cells or anything like that.
I want to ask you to talk a little bit further. It's difficult.
Brennan, ek gaan nie vir jou stil maak van ek weet en ek stop van julle
Kom aan, goed.
ek werk dus met baie aan.
Ek werk ook.
Gaan dwars deur.
There's a say 14 degrees, you don't work your bees below 14 degrees. You don't work your bees in the rain. I disagree.
Okay.
Now, I'll work on canola. I will ignore everything. I mean, I won't work it if it's very cold, but I'll do my splits in the rain. I don't have a problem with that.
Us too, we'll work in the rain. The old school was we don't open beehives in the rain. We're doing splits in the rain, full rain. They work beautifully. They work beautifully.
Not a problem. Colder than 14 degrees, I have not had a problem.
I'll tell you the reason behind it. Let me tell you the reason behind what they say. If your hives are very strong, there's a lot of open eggs. The biology of the bee is the queen laid her egg, I think that's day 2, 3 and 4, 5. Brennan, you did the presentation.
The egg hatches on day after 3 days.
Yes. And then, no, not the queen cell, that presentation that you did for the 46 second speedy, did you do that for them?
What do you want me to say?
The queen laid her egg, and then the egg, dan raak die eiers nog, somebody, die Richard come and translate in the office. Dan die eiertjie gaan dan begin ontwikkel in 'n larwe. En daai larwe moet 2500 keer 'n dag kos kry. Sy kos is sy vleis, is die proteïen, is pollen en die nektar is dan ons sê sy rys. So dis so 'n huis wat met klomp seunskinders julle het, dan skree aan sy maag is honger. So Brennan het afgebreek dat dit eintlik sê elke 46 sekondes moet daai eiertjie pollen hê. Nou verstaan julle hoekom daar pollen patties ingekom het. En Sodra daar baie oop eiertjies is, wat hulle moet nou al twee reg gekry het met hulle groot bokse met baie broed, dan gaan al in loswerkers gaan moet hulle pollen soek. En dit is, ek het by my gesien dat op 14 grade toe werk die baie sê. En dit is hoekom hulle kan sê, ons kan in reën. Die tweede ding gaan split. As jy wil split doen, kan jy nie baie werk wanneer jy wil. Dan werk jy wanneer hulle wil gewerk. Ok, jy kan nie besluit, nee, ek het nie vandag lus om op te staan nie. As ek jou tyd is, moet jy jou ding moet doen. Dan die ander een net, dat ek wil vraag, Jaco, waar is Jaco? Jaco, net Brennan wat hier is in die groot manne.
Waar is Jaco?
Jaco en Teens en hulle, ek hoor nou, hulle sê die lane workers. Lane workers is 'n helse probleem vir die Scatellata. And that's where I said I'm controversial in what I'm saying, because for 2 years now I'm fighting with Mike also about lane workers. But lane workers is not a big problem for the Capensis. It is, in fact, 80%, 70% or 80% of our fees are lane worker fees. So I don't care about lane workers, but don't take my word on it. I will have a mic also workshop for you one day, and then you take that story up again. Because my concern last year was I saw a swarm as I go to do pollination. As I approach my hive, I saw a swarm going. My hive swarm, my farm het getrek. En toe gaan ek in my kos en toe staan oop eiertjies. En ek het nou baie dink en hulle geredeneer wat hoe praat jy, hoe weet ek dit is my koningin? Ek het gedink my koningin het dit gelees. Dalk is dit net iemand 'n ander korse wat kom rus het daar. En toe sê Mike vir my, maar ons werkers lê baie eiertjies, maar dan is daar altyd een boertjie wat kom en die ander eiertjies kom verwyder. So, maar dit is iets wat ek sal op ingaan, want persoonlik, ek worry nie oor lyn workers nie, ek doen dieselfde split, similar like James, net nie met nog een super op nie. Ek het nog nooit een split gehad dat nie werk nie. Selfs as hy, ek begin van 22 af, begin ek my koolvorm van dan doen ek ook die inspektie. So, ek dink jy moet die sterk swerm om jy split te doen. Maar die groot ding is, as jy splits doen, moet jy werk aan die baie wil werk.
Ja, kan ek sê 'n vraag eintlik. Is 'n Afrikaans vraag. Ek het so 3 jaar gelede begin split ook op baie kleiner skaal. 20, 30, 50 plante. Dit het gewerk vir 'n redelike 80% sukses reg die jaar het ek 70 uitgery. Waarvan ek nou 30 gesplit. Dit is fisies gesplit gister. En daai speel is so sterk. Ek ry dan 15 op beslag. Ek terugkom te werk, daar moeder speel dan weer op die Canola op die middelsyde. So wat ek gaan doen, ek gaan eers wil 'n teamspak maandag. En ek wil vir 3 dae gaan en kyk wat gebeur. Ek doen dit veel speel, maar ek is op hierdie produksie hoofsaaklik. I'm very scared that we need to get the timing right, because I've got most of my hives, they're very strong colonies. So you've got to be very careful. You're entering the season now in the thing book where the bees going to make honey on that. So you look at the former, you swell with the egg by the circle. The timing with the rest is that you need 3 of 6 splits doen. En dan staat die 2 of 3 moedervormen. Of 2 of 3 keer op egg wat zwakker is. En jy gaan minder hierin kry. So I think it's all about time and you've got to watch that.
Ek split ook soos James met die 2 moedervormen. James het het my afgesel. So basically, jou split klaar te doen is jy, ek moet binnen 2 weke daarna super op my split. Maar al wat ek nou anders doen as ek my boorste boks opsit, dan trek ek alle heuning. So 22 Februarie begin is ons wanneer dan voer ek ook en ek gee pollen en al daai tyd moet ons doen. Maar ek het Forest Red gum by my wat ook korwe opbou. En so ek kon hierdie jaar nog niks op canola split. My canola is useless om my net canola lande maar is useless. So die Forest Red dra my deur en hy bondgousblom. En so wat ek basies doen as ek my box, ek het ook nie super so ek die box bol op. Ek probeer so gou as moontlik dit berg. my soekers wegkry, want ek raak kwaad as die koningin daarbo gaan wees. Hoe nie daarvan. So, wat ek doen, ek trek by pollen en my cap broed op na die boorste boks toe. En ek sit volwaspelle tussen die volwaspelle en 'n uitgeboude koek en 'n volwaspelle, want hulle bou hom net vinniger uit. En ek doen homself daaronder. So nou het ek klaar uitgeboude broed bo en hulle sê hulle moet weer broed onderop. So jy sit basies, jy doen 'n split basies met 2 vol swerms. So dan wanneer jy checker, dan moet jy partykeer heuning langsaan uitvat of te veel pollen wegvat om te keer dat jou boks nie vol is, dat jy nog kan spasie maak. En dan al wat ek doen, ek sit as ek nou dit klaar gesplit het, sit ek ons ook die dag as ek split, sit ek ook die queen excluder tussenin. Ek vat al die open brood bo. As ek te veel cap brood het, ek moet keer dat met ek besluit. Te keer dat my swerm onder nie te vol is nie, sal ek cap bo sit. So ek die swerm vanmiddag gedoen het, vanaand gaan ek. En dan rook ek net so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of ek rook aan weerskante, ek is nie bang vir baie, so oorrook hulle nie, maar jy moet so 'n bietjie rook, dat jou jong bytjies kan oploop. En jy tel tot 10 jaar, jy haal die moederkorf, kyk, ons het dan die moederkorf toegesteek op onmiddellik, as jy gerook het, steek op toe, dan haal jy die voorste korf af op die voetstuk, gryp die moederkorf, sak hem weg, 2 km. So al die veldvye,
CA1088, jou ligte brand.
So dit is baie dieselfde wat hulle doen. So al jou foragers kom ons nou na die nuwe korf. Soos hier in die groot splitbox wat nou hier bly. As hy te min by is, die foragers kom, ons het die nurseries nodig om daai oop elefies te versorg en vir hulle kos te gee. Daai elke 46 sekonde. So my foragers wat kom dan in die nuwe korf, en daai gaan terug na die korf 2 km daarna. Ek gee om 4 dae kans, dan kry jy alweer so volgende box op gaan uitkom. En ek voer ook. So dit is maar, die voer is maar dood eenvoudig om te stimuleer vir die wax production.
For me, there's a bit of confusion about when do you need to move the 1 hour away. If you do your split today, first you go split, you need to exclude it. You need to move it a day, 2 days, 7 days, 10 days.
It depends on what type you're doing. What are you trying to do by putting your yongbe in the top box? Can I go on to mine?
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to get bees into a box. Okay, this is my way of doing splits. As Riet said, they must be strong. There's 2 types of splits that I do. There's one where I'm working with all the young bees. That's first prize really, because the longevity of your split is longer by using younger bees because they die later. So your split lasts a lot longer. When your new queen kicks in, you've got more bees to support her. So I'm going to just talk about that system first. I prefer to use the young bees to do a split. So young bees are the nurse bees. They're the ones that have emerged from their comb. They can't fly. Their duties in the hive are feeding. So I want to get young bees into my top box. My top box is going to be my split. So as everybody else has been saying, and well, as Riet does, as James does, you've got your colony in your bottom box. We take off any supers. We've checked it for disease. We give them space because they're building up and they need space for the bees. We're also allowing space if the queen needs more space. So I don't put a queen excluder in. It allows more free flow in the unit. If you put a queen excluder in, I find it sort of is a barrier sometimes, especially if you're working with a lot of foundation. Right, so now you've got a box full of bees, lots of brood, maybe 8, 10, maybe 12 frames of brood, sometimes only 7. There's a good chance the queen is sitting in the top box, unfortunately, so you can't just work with them. So one has to now separate them out. So I'm going to configure the top box with with 3 frames of open brood. I want this top box to have open brood in to draw the young nurse bees up. Okay? So I'm going to look at this whole thing as a unit, and I'm going to make my split up out of this. I go into my hive. I'll go through it, and I'll generally start to pull the first few frames out. They're normally the lousy frames on the outside. They've got a bit of pollen and nectar.
You're shaking all your bees down.
Sorry, I've shaken all the bees down. The queen may be up there, so just treat it with care. You don't want to damage. You've got one queen in the colony, so you're going to take one frame at a time and you're going to shake it down, pop it in here. I've generally got 4 or 5 or 6 frames of foundation. I want to make my bottom brood chamber as amazing as possible for the queen, so I will select these 3 frames of beautifully drawn out comb. My trigger for splitting a colony is generally they've drawn out my foundation that I've got at the top here. I'm going a little bit fast, I'm sorry guys. 1 frame at a time, my drawn foundation, I'll take it out, split the bees off, and just put it next to the hive, and keep myself 3 beautiful frames, right? Then I go through the rest of my frames and I configure this bottom box with all the poor combs on the outside and my beautiful drawn combs on the inside, shaking each frame off very carefully one at a time. Okay, my poor combs on the outside with honey and pollen, beautifully drawn combs. There's some bees in here, a little bit of smoke, shake it off, make sure there's no queen on there. If I found any brood in the top, I'm looking for open brood, so I will go through between the top box and this box. I will find myself 3 frames of open brood, once again shaking the bees off very carefully that you don't damage the queen and that she doesn't fall out if they go into the box. So we've got 3 frames of open brood that we put in the top box where all the bees have been shaken off. Once again, I squeeze all my combs across and I put my new frames in. That's my system always from the left side. So this beautifully drawn out foundation, these 3 comb frames will go in here. I'm generally taking 5, 6 frames of brood in here, which is very important. If I'm going to do splits, I still need a pollination unit. I don't want to rob them blind, that there's not enough resources here, not enough bees, not enough brood. They're not useful as a pollination unit for me. So it's slightly different to James, where he wants to do 3, 4 little nukes out of it. I want to get at least 1. So now what I've done is, this box has got drawn combs, nectar and pollen on the outside, and 3 frames of open brood. 2, 3. 3 next brooder. Alright. This box goes down here. Sure. Okay, squeeze all your frames up to one side. That's how I work. Lid on top. Right. So this is actually an empty box. We've just got empty frames. We've shaken all the bees off. We've made sure we've got the queen down. We've put a queen next to her. She's now in the bottom. It's an empty box. We put it on top here. That open brood that's in here is the attractant that's going to pull all those young bees up, because those little larvae are crying for food every 46 seconds, as Riet said. So that pulls up all your young bees into the top box. And that takes only 4 or 5 hours. So you can do it this morning, and this evening you can take it off, and it's populated already. Okay? So once we've done that, we also configure ourselves to make our life easy later when we want to pull off our split, whether we do it later or tomorrow. Our floor is in place, our strap is in place under the floor. Our floor has been sponged up already. I'm just borrowing James's equipment, but generally we'll have that all ready for us. So either tonight if we've got time, or tomorrow night. I prefer to do it in the evening, because when I put my split down on its site, I don't want the bees to fly out and get lost. I want it to be that they cool off overnight, and in the morning they come out more gently. So let's say I did it this morning, this evening. All I'm going to do to do my split, I'm just going to pop off this box like this. Shop. I've got my spare lid in place for. This hive is already closed, so the bees aren't coming out. They're not going crazy. We're on the canola where they want to go crazy, so it's a very clean operation. Onto their ships, onto the bucky. Here's your split. You've got your spare lid in place. Your spare lid goes onto the hive and you walk away. It must be just specific functions. Don't make it complicated. Keep it simple. I don't like to leave my splits on the canola, because the canola is going to finish in 4 weeks' time. And by the time that thing's queen right, you've got such a little benefit of the canola to stimulate this colony. So we'll take this colony and we'll put it somewhere where there's going to be veldblomme, either blow blommetjies or something that's going to be flowering for the next 2 months, and or feed it. Okay, so that's split number 1. Did you guys get it? That's working with the young nurse bees. That gives you the longest life of your split. And this works beautifully on the canola because the queen is just so active that it really helps with the swarming, as I said. Sometimes we do splits in autumn and there are not a lot of young bees. In autumn, the queen has slowed down after the eucalyptus flown, and we've actually got more flying bees, more field bees. So we do a different type of split where we're only working with the field bees. Not ideal, but it works very, very well. And I've done thousands of splits on the canola, but I use it more in autumn. That we use the field bees to populate the box. We need bees in the box, we need brood in the box, and we need pollen. So our starting point, once again, starting point is always 2 brood boxes because the frames are all interchangeable. With or without a queen excluder. These things are all flexible as long as you're just getting the concept of what we do, right? These things work really well with 2 people. Here's our colony. That's where it lives. That's its site where it's been all summer. What we're going to do is we're going to take the top off. We can't pick the whole thing up together. It's too heavy.
Use it.
Right?
Use the second person.
And then we're going to take our rivers here. Later, when we go to the bees, you can help. Right, so we've taken the colony away, and all the field bees want to come back here because they've got their GPS reading of exactly where their hive was standing. So yeah, all the field bees are flying in there. They've got nothing in there at the moment. And between these boxes, we're once again going to create the same conditions that I demonstrated here. We need to put food in there. So we're going to start on one side, and we're going to get your nectar and pollen, shake all the bees off. Whether it comes from the top of this box, we need to put nectar and pollen. We need to put 3 frames that have all been shaken off with open brood. And we're going to fill up with frames, whether it's nectar and pollen or empty frames. But your basics is you need some food for the bees. They need pollen to feed larvae. That's your protein. They need to feed the larvae to make queen. So you need pollen, nectar, and you can fill up. You can do it in a 5 frame. You can do it in anything. But the basics is young open larvae because you make the best queens from a 12-hour-old larva. So you really want your youngest possible larva in here that they can make it a high quality queen. This is catching all the field bees, they're all flying in here. This one is losing all its field bees, but it's got all its nurse bees. Leave that for 6 weeks. This one you can take away. I would generally, at the end of summer, this part would move into the fynbos areas to be left alone to be overwintered. We would have filled up both the boxes with frames from your top deep. The reason I start with 2 deeps in this situation is the top deep has the smell of the colony in it. So when you use it here, it smells right. You want it to smell right for the returning bees so that they're more familiar with the smell of it. Of their nest. Okay, so those are the 2 concepts that I use. And you can really just take a colony of 10 frames, take 5 frames out, put it in a box. 1 box has got a queen, 1 doesn't. If there are enough bees, the box without a queen will make a queen. And they will become queen right. Not as great success rate, it works though. These other 2 that I use work better, get a higher percentage success.
From what I'm reading, it is because of the young bees that you are attracting to, in the process, to the open brood.
Yes. Young bees are the best producers of royal jelly. That is their job, they are feeders. But even in the system where I'm using only the old bees, they can revert back and they can produce, their pharyngeal glands can still produce royal jelly. But ideally, those young bees are the best nurses and they make the best queens. So those are two systems, but actually the third one is just a 50-50 split. They all work. What I suggest is that we go and do it in practical now and see how crazy those bees are going to be. Andreas?
So can I just ask you about that? So now you've split it, and you are attracting your worker bees to come into your box that you're going to...
Your flying bees, your felt back.
The flying bees.
Yes.
But there's no queen in there, and there's no nurse bees in there.
There's larvae in there, there's pollen, and there's honey to carry them through that queenless period. Okay. In all of these splits that we're talking about, first prize is if you can introduce a queen cell. So, the guys that did the queen course, I'm trying to inspire us to become, maybe to develop our queen breeding, our queen production. First prize is if you can pop a queen in the next day. It shortens the whole queenless period, your successes are better, the recovery of your colony is faster. But we're not talking about queen breeding today, that's just an add-on onto the splitting. Splits on their own work very, very well, and they can be some of your best producing colonies. If you do them now in spring, this summer in lucerne or on eucalyptus trees, your splits can be some of your best producers with their beautiful young queen that's so active. So I'm suggesting that we go and do some practical. We're going to jump on a few buckies. If you guys don't mind sharing it, pretty easier than us all driving down. We squeeze onto some buckies. The site is about 500 meters down the road. And then afterwards we come back here again and maybe quick questions, unpack, or just stand around and have coffee and unpack more. What I suggest, guys, is dress well. Last year I said dress well and the bees were so accommodating. But on the canola they can be so unpredictable, it can be incredibly fierce. So cover up well. Never. Yeah.